Imagine you're taking the best nap of your life, dreaming about the past, about your humble beginnings as a classic 2D platformer, dreaming about your massive jump to 3D platforming and flourishing from there, dreaming about your third adventure in 3D, where suddenly everybody starts assuming they're the funniest man in the world and everything starts to go off the rails a little bit. Hey, come on now, you know how dreams go. But then, the dream takes a dark turn, and you find your personal space being invaded by an army of absolutely irredeemable pests who want nothing more than to consume everything in your world and take it for their own for years to come. Yeah, this dream is definitely starting to become more of a nightmare, I'll say. But suddenly, you snap awake in a cold sweat and feel nostalgic for those humble beginnings, where things were simple, and you were literally all about pure 2D platforming and nothing else. Good times. If only there was some way we could relive all of that one more time. If only. Ah yes, Rayman Origins, a bona fide hard reset on the IP that is our lovable dog, Rayman. After years of playing second fiddle to the unfortunate abomination that is the Raving Rabbids, it's time for our hero to return in an all-new adventure where he goes right back to doing what he does best. Running and jumping on stuff. Rayman Origins truly is a sight to behold. It really holds no shame in letting you know that this game is an absolute excursion in that sweet, sweet nostalgia. It's a pure, side-scrolling platformer a la Rayman 1, complete with all the classic moves from that game that you unlock by saving the various nymphs who are held in captivity in each of the game's worlds. And, oh my god, I love that hat! The fact is, this game really is the spitting image of the original Rayman 1, but with updated graphics and some much needed modern game sensibilities injected into its being. After all, I really don't think many of us miss the brutal difficulty of the original, and while this title is no slouch in that department, it most definitely won't run you off with the absurd ask of 100%ing the game before you're even allowed to fight the final boss. And won't just be so impossibly hard that you want to rip your eyeballs out by game's end. Sure, could you argue that this game is rather unoriginal at its core? Yeah, but when you consider the fact that up to this point the Rayman IP had been lying dormant, nay, completely dead, with no notable mainline titles to speak of since Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc, a hard reset was much needed here in order to remind fans that you really can teach an old dog new tricks. Well, I mean, I guess they're not new tricks in this case, since he's basically just doing all the old stuff he used to do, but now when he does them, everything is just shinier, so it's definitely not entirely new stuff that he's doing, so I don't... You know what? Shut up. While normally I do not condone long-standing IPs relying on old concepts and ideas to carry their newer projects forward, in this case, Rayman was sorely needing it. Because I must reiterate, Rayman had not done anything of any significance besides stand next to these guys for years up to this point. So yeah, let the nostalgia baiting commence. Our story begins with our heroes, Rayman, Globox, and some teensies taking a fancy snooze in a very familiar, lush green forest known as the Glade of Dreams. But due to Globox's incessant snoring, the group unknowingly disturbs the peace of an evil grandma character who resides deep underground in the land of the livid dead. She retaliates by unleashing a swarm of evil Dark Toon characters on the land above, who proceed to kidnap all of the world's Electoons and Nymph Guardians, thereby plunging the entire overworld into chaos. And to think, this was all caused by Globox, again, because of his absolute stupidity. Look man, all I'm saying is this dude might just be more a liability than an asset. And there you have it. That sets up the rest of the game where Rayman breaks out of prison again and sets out on a quest to save all of his friends from captivity. The setup here is about as blink and you'll miss it as you can get as far as plot goes. And as far as a fresh reboot for Rayman goes, this is exactly what it should be. It harkens back to the old setup for Rayman 1 and does so in a smooth and succinct fashion while also giving us some cute little character moments through the adorable art style. This is not going to be one of those epic Rayman plot lines that takes itself halfway serious like Rayman 2 did. This is going to be just good old-fashioned fun and nothing more. Oh, and if you're wondering whether or not Murphy or Globox are gonna fly in with out-of-pocket jokes like they did in Rayman 3, you don't gotta stress about that either. Rayman Origins features a completely silent cast who only really emote through brief mouth noises and over-the-top facial animations. I freaking love this, dude. This really drives home the fact that this will be a no-nonsense adventure focused on pure platforming. And pure platforming Rayman Origins is, as you start off the first world, which of course has to be the lush green forest setting that starts off every Rayman game. These graphics are absolutely beautiful. However, I can't help but feel like Ubisoft felt a need here to cater to the, younger demographic? I'm not knocking these graphics for how slick and silky smooth they look, but I do find it a little jarring how childish and whimsical they clearly are meant to be. Kudos to them though, kids probably loved this shit, and even though the childish graphics style does remind me a bit too much of the Parasites, it's not going to be make or break for me. I'm here for one reason, and one reason only, and that's for the platforming. Okay, I'm just going to rip this band-aid off right now. Rayman Origins is the best game in the whole series as far as raw gameplay goes. Oh. Can I cook? I mean, look, you can't tell me this isn't some of the smoothest, the most succinct, polished, well-put-together momentum-based platforming you've ever seen in your whole life. It's straight immaculate, and it's some of the most fun I've had with a modern platformer in years. Wait, 2011 is still considered modern, right? All the running, jumping, swinging from vines, jumping off enemies, wall riding, it's all here in tenfold, and truthfully, I think Rayman Origins comes the closest out of any platformer I've played to simulating real-life parkour. Yeah, bro. Hardcore that parkour. Throughout each level, you are tasked with finding and freeing hidden Electoon cages, and you need a certain amount of total freed Electoon cages to advance to the boss level at the end of each of the game's worlds. This is such a great system because it encourages you to complete the game as you go, so that way by the time you beat the final boss, you likely will have completed enough of the game that 100% completion wouldn't sound quite as intimidating. It also encourages further exploration of these immaculately designed stages because, hey, the more cages you free up, the more of the game you unlock. And while I won't say the Electoon cages are all that difficult to find, it's still satisfying as heck when you do find them. Cages can be found in secret hidden rooms where they are guarded by a few enemies. Once you beat all the enemies in the room, you get the cage. Each of these rooms basically serves as a nice little enemy gauntlet for you to overcome, and the thing about many of them is the strategy that is laid out before you to beat all these baddies is usually a simple set piece, where you trigger a chain of events in the level's environment that wipes out all the baddies in the room instantly. Sometimes due to this, these rooms can oftentimes feel more like a formality than anything, but I guess it's still a cool way to show off how intricately designed these levels really are. You can also potentially collect 3 extra Electoon cages in each level depending on the number of yellow lums you collect. Yeah, this game is not joking around. It's a collectathon is what it is. And as much as you'd like to believe that collecting yellow lums in Origins is easy, you'd be straight lying to yourself. It's not really finding the yellow lums that's the hard part, it's more the sheer number of them you have to collect. If you want all 3 extra lum cages in each level, you need 300 yellow lums. And if you want to receive the final level completion medal on top of that, you need at least Tree Fitty. And like I said, man, it's not always easy to collect every last one of these SOBs. Sometimes you have to go out of your way to find lum coins, which reward you with 25 yellow lums, but to secure those 25 lums, you have to hold onto the coin for a few seconds without getting hit by anything, or else you lose the coin. Sometimes a double lum appears from nowhere, where when collected gives you only a brief few seconds where the value of each yellow lum collected is temporarily doubled. So yeah, you'll definitely be scrambling to grab all the lums in your vicinity when this happens, and that can really open you up to take a hit from an enemy or object, if you're not careful. Adding on top of all this is the fact that Rayman doesn't have health this time around, because in Origins, it's either 1 or 2 hits and you're donezo. If you collect a heart container in the levels, you'll have a heart above your head, which represents that you can take an extra hit and you won't die. But once that heart's gone, you've got 1 hit left before everything goes dark, friendo. And that's no good. Huh. So it seems in his old age, Rayman has gotten quite fragile over the years. Where at one point he had a full-on health bar, He is now left with the unfortunately frugal Sonic the Hedgehog 2 hits and you're done system. Now, while in Sonic the Hedgehog, you had oodles upon oodles of rings around you at all times to save you from the unfortunate compromise that is death. But in Origins, the heart containers are fewer and far between. Rayman Origins, much like its spiritual predecessor, is no doubt a hard game. I find it hilarious how it lures you through its kiddie cartoonish graphics into thinking that the game's gonna be a cakewalk, just to turn around and say, ha ha ha. At least this time around, Ubisoft Montpellier had their heads screwed on correctly and decided to actually balance out the game's difficulty so as not to accidentally drive off a majority of returning players and create a niche cult following centered around players who are psycho and actually enjoy the game's impossible challenge. Origins did end up creating a niche following, but not because of its difficulty. But I'll get to that later. Yes, Origins is hard, but no, it's not impossible. I think it serves the absolute perfect level of challenge for seasoned platformers. And for newbies this game will be like stepping straight into the trenches, my boy. But that's okay, because it's still a very approachable experience regardless of your skill level. It won't lure you into a false sense of security in World 1 and then immediately feed you to the wolves in World 2 like Rayman 1 did, but it will ask quite a bit more of you than, say, the Super Mario Bros. Series generally does. Because Rayman Origins, in spite of its kiddie graphics, is a game secretly geared towards the hardcore gamer, much in the way the Crash Bandicoot series is. And that mentality, in my eyes, is impressively consistent with the mentality of the first game. And since this is no doubt a spiritual remake of that game, it makes sense to not dumb down the challenge too much. Yes, you want to correct the error of running off a majority of your players this time, but at the same time you still gotta maintain the integrity that this is a spiritual successor to Rayman 1. And in order to do that, you gotta make Origins difficult. Each world in Origins hosts special one-off challenge levels that not only mix up the core gameplay but provide for that extra challenge very well. They even brought back that one mosquito flyby section from the old game and expanded it into entire levels where you're not only bobbing and weaving incoming enemies and objects, but you're also getting the chance to go all shooty on their asses. Yeah, I guess Mosquito can shoot stuff now. Look, this game came out the same year as Modern Warfare 3 and Dead Space 2. You knew this was inevitable. They also brought in a brand new type of challenge level called Tricky Treasure Challenges. Cringeworthy name aside, these levels are freaking insane, dude. You're basically chasing a sentient treasure chest through a non-stop platformer gauntlet, and you wouldn't believe how tight you have to be with every little jump. Every little move you make on the controller to the most granular detail will determine whether or not you die and have to restart the whole thing. I love this stuff, dude, even if it did stress me out my first few times going through them. When you beat each tricky treasure level, you receive an interesting red skulltooth, who a certain someone that's been lurking toward the beginning of the game might just be very fond of. But there's no time for that just yet because we've got a game to beat. It's revealed in the final level that one of the teensies in your posse was actually a backstabbing piece of garbage this whole time, and he turns on our heroes, revealing that he had actually placed a microphone disguised as a flower next to Glowbox at the beginning of the game so that the sound of his snoring would carry to the underworld, and he had been using the power of the yellow lums also to cause all this havoc up to this point, and is basically responsible for all the bad stuff happening thus far. Or something like that. Yeah, look, I'm not saying I'm an expert on the plot of Rayman Origins, for Christ's sake. The point is, this backstabbing SOB sends you through a few repeat boss fights from earlier in the game to distract you. And when that doesn't work, and you finally make your way back to his office and have the guy completely cornered where you now have the chance to end all of this chaos, what does he do? You son of a gun. Bro literally played the ultimate trump card on Rayman by breaking out into dance. He knew from the previous games that Rayman would not be able to resist the urge to join in on the fun. Now that's long-term storytelling right there, I'll tell you what. After our dude makes his escape, we take chase after him in one last ultra-challenging platforming gauntlet, where at the end of it, we can catch him and finally end this whole big thing, and no, we still got one last ultra-hard mosquito section to do. God damn it. They really went all out with this last boss, pretty much pulling from every aspect of the game and creating a gauntlet of final challenges for you to get through. Wow. But after you finally blow up his ship and unalive that two-faced SOB, things pretty much reset back to normal where our heroes can resume their nap as if nothing ever happened. But wait, there's more! While we may have technically beaten the quote-unquote final boss and had the credits roll indicating the quote-unquote end of the game, we still have all 10 of those skull teeth to hand off to this character. So, let's see what happens when we do so. Wait, is this... You mean to tell me that our reward for collecting all 10 skull teeth is that we unlock more of this hard-ass game? Okay, so when you collect all 10 skull teeth, you unlock the actual final level of the game, the Land of the Livid Dead. This is that area from before where we saw the angry grandma unleash all the nightmare monsters on the world. So thematically, this is where it all kind of comes together. There isn't a whole lot of focus on story at this point though, as it's just straightforward platforming all the way through. And in terms of challenge, this area is a monster. The amount of angry grandmas you stomp on to get to the end is extremely satisfying. And the final boss? This final boss is... I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's basically an epic Shadow of the Colossus style fight, where you're climbing around on her body to get to her weak point as she tries to destroy you. Once defeated, it's revealed she is actually the Land of the Livid Dead nymph, and she thanks you for returning her to normal. And roll credits. So there you have it, folks. Rayman Origins. A classic return to form for the series, I'll say. Complete with all the parkour platforming you could possibly want, and enough challenge to suffice even the hardcore gamers as well. Now, the new art style might be a little Saturday morning cartoonsy, and that might turn some away, but honestly, I still think there's enough charisma here to warrant a job well done. Great work, Ubisoft. You guys did a fantastic job. Now, after all is said and done, it would appear that Rayman Origins was a home run for this franchise. I mean, you've got a fantastic game that completely re-energizes who is nearly a dead character up to this point for years. So, therefore, all the stars must have been in alignment here. This had to have been the very game that brought Rayman back from obscurity and brought him back into the fold as a top name in the gaming industry, right? So, Rayman Origins upon release had a seriously underwhelming performance on the market, dude. Seemingly, nobody cared about this game when it came out. And this is an absolute travesty, because in a just and fair world, a game this good should have shot the Rayman series to the very top of this industry. It should have brought Rayman back and solidified him as one of the icons of gaming. But it just didn't. And it just goes to show that in the modern gaming industry, the financial success of any one game isn't determined by the quality of the game itself, but rather by the quality of its marketing. And that is really, really sad. And sometimes even that isn't true. Sometimes it's all about the time and place of which a game is released. And Rayman Origins, guess what? Was released at probably the worst possible time it could have been released. You see, Rayman Origins' lack of sales is due to a very distinct 1-2 punch that occurred through 2010 and 2011. And the first of those punches occurred at Ubisoft's 2010 E3 press conference, where they proceeded to treat the official reveal of Rayman Origins like an afterthought, in favor of showing off how the game's graphics were constructed, as well as taking the time to plug Uplay, one of Ubisoft's harebrained schemes at the time that has since morphed into the online service we now know as Ubisoft Connect. Literally all we got from the presenter during all this is a brief trailer for the game, and Rayman is back, and nothing more. Go figure. It also doesn't help that Rayman Origins was released in November of 2011, a rather bloated period of time in the industry where we saw the release of countless AAA titles such as Uncharted 3, Sonic Generations, Modern Warfare 3, Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, Cars 2 the video game. So when you consider the sheer amount of absolute blockbuster games that came out in the same month as Origins, and when you also remember once again that Rayman had been in the doghouse for years up to this point with absolutely no momentum built up for his brand since Rayman 3, the release of Rayman Origins on the open market basically went over like a fart in church. There simply was no room for a platformer like Origins, with Rayman as the main selling point in a market dominated by AAA shooty shooters. Gamers wanted blood, realistic graphics, and gritty, down-to-earth, mature games in the early 2010s. Not a Looney Tunes side-scroller where you defeat enemies by jumping on their heads and watch them blow up like a balloon. The bottom line is, Rayman Origins is a fantastically well put together game that came out during a time when the industry simply wasn't interested in buying what it was selling, and the seller wasn't exactly all that motivated in selling it. These two situational components made it so that Rayman Origins was pretty much shoved out onto the open market to die, thereby missing its window of opportunity to truly make an impact and possibly revive a dormant mascot. I truly believe that had Origins been released under different circumstances by a company that actually gave a damn, not only would it have sold a lot better, but it would have revived Rayman's image and brought him back into the spotlight. Because Origins really and truly is that good, and it's the exact return to form Rayman needed to remind everyone what his games are all about. And it's so good, in fact, that I think it's safe to say it's a game that was too good for its time.